I'm going to go through them again really quickly because I know most people aren't pretty good at that. The first thing is passwords. Passwords are the first line of protection for almost everything, and they're done badly by most people. Passwords that, first of all, a lot of people use bad passwords. Like there's about 100 words that people use, and it's things like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in password, and also things like shadow and monkey and dragon. Also things like names of your kids or birth dates or stupid stuff like that. And then two-factor authentication is this really important security practice that's starting to appear on many sites like Gmail. I think that every journalist should be using two-factor authentication on their email account. We'll go into what that is. And then you can't use the same password everywhere, because if you use the same password everywhere, then if someone breaks your password on one site, they have everything. So that's a big no-no. But because it's hard to have 50 different passwords, there are tools to help you manage that, so I suggest those as well. Here are real passwords. This is a list of passwords and how many people had that password. You can see that most people use password, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It just boggles my mind how many accounts you can get access to by typing in password for password. Obviously, don't do this. And don't use English words either, because actually most passwords, when we talk about guessing passwords, it's not a human who does the guessing, it's a computer. And the computer can guess really quickly. I love teaching with XKCD. This is XKCD arguing that this whole letters and numbers thing, it's hard to remember and it's kind of a waste of time. A better way to do it is just to have passphrases. So you take 4 normal words, you string them together. That's actually a really solid password. It's hard for computers to guess because there's a lot of bits, basically, of information. And it's easy for you to remember. So that's what I would recommend for passwords. Or, yeah?
I don't keep the same password across sites, but I do have kind of a rotating way, like deciphering what the words will be in that password, kind of like my user code. Am I just as bad at keeping the same password across multiple sites, or?
You mean you have some way to determine what password will be on which site?
I mean, if they were pretty clever, but so they're all different, but they all have kind of a unifying theme to them.
That's not as good as having totally unique passwords, but it's a lot better than having the same password, because then they have to crack multiple passwords and see the pattern. Yeah.
Except that I have a throwaway password for the sites that I don't care about, like when I have to log into sites that require a login in order to read the news, but I don't have any personal information there, I don't have any financial information there. I use the same throwaway password for all those sites.
Yeah, I mean, that could be reasonable. The main thing I would worry about with the idea of a throwaway password, I mean, you're right to single out personal information, but also, if someone had that password, could they impersonate you? Could they use that to launch an attack against a colleague? Is the thing I would worry about also. So that's the first message, basic password hygiene. Two-factor authentication. How many people have run into this or know what this is? All right, that's pretty good. That's definitely up from last year. So Gmail has this. I think Twitter just launched this. Unfortunately, I don't think Facebook has this yet.
They do.
They do?
Yep. Security codes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent, okay. So the basic idea is you need something other than your password to log in. This is an incredibly good idea because it means that, it's like not being able to use your credit card without your PIN, right? So the standard ATM card is two-factor authentication. It's a thing that you have and a thing that you need to know. So it's the same idea, right? There's one thing that you need to know, which is your password, and one thing that you need to have, which is the phone that receives the code. I can't emphasize this enough. You're in a high-risk profession, turn this on. It will annoy you only slightly. there might be situations where you don't have your phone or you're roaming or whatever, but there are ways around that. Google will let you print out a little list of verification codes that you can keep in your wallet so that you can log in a small number of times when you don't have the ability to receive the code. It remembers the code on the computer that you use most. It's totally practical, really easy. Do it, please. And remember, here's the thing, right? It's not enough that you do it. Everybody in your organization has to do it. Otherwise, they're just going to attack the account that doesn't have it. I talked also at great length about phishing. Oh wow, it's cutting off the bottom of the screen. Yeah. My sense is that phishing is the most common attack against journalists in practice. Talking about, in this case it's okay, talking about secure email and intercepted communication is kind of sexy, but I don't actually know of a case where a journalist's security was broken by intercepting an email. Whereas I know of lots of cases where journalist security was broken by phishing. Because phishing is a lot easier and it works really well because most people don't really understand what it is or that they need to protect against it. So you've all seen obvious phishing emails like this, right? So it looks like spam, it's really suspicious. It's some crazy bad English email that says, please go here and type in your password. Everybody's good with this. That's not what phishing attacks look like now. I mean, there's still a few, but they're getting a lot more sophisticated. Do you remember this? Yeah, crash the stock market briefly. This is how that was done. So it was an email that came from a legitimate AP account, right? So they impersonated an AP staffer. I'm not sure if they did that by messing with the email header. So you can spoof email. Email's totally insecure. Or if they actually had that person's account first. But it looks like it came from a colleague. And it looks like it links to a Washington Post article. But it didn't. It went to, I don't know the details of this, but it either tricked them into entering a Twitter password or it dropped some malware on the computer. I asked in the last session, how do you defend against this type of attack, right? So your alarm bells need to go off when you see this email. How do you know to be suspicious of this email? Yeah, great.
You hover over the hyperlink, and then you see in the status bar what the URL actually goes to.
Very good, yeah. So you're all familiar with the idea that a link says, these are my slides, and then you hover over the word and it shows you what link you go to. So you all know that what the link text is not the same as the URL. But for some reason, when people see a spelled out URL, they assume it goes to that URL. Not true. That text could go to any URL. So you got to see what URL it goes to by hovering over it. And I submit to you, as people in a risky profession, that if you're using a web browser or an email client that doesn't let you see where the URL goes before you click, you should be.
Is that the text of actual email?
Yeah, that's the actual
Nobody's
text.
happy if you talks that way, right?
Very good, right. So,
holy shit, read this.
well, I mean, I used to work at the AP, and so I don't know about that. But that's the key point here is there's no context, right? It's a totally generic email. It requires no knowledge about the recipient. It says nothing about why you should read it. It's totally context-free. Yeah.
Going back to what you just said, what kind of browser do you think is the best to use? Is it generic one you use?
I mean, Chrome is my browser of choice. It's frequently updated. Google pays a lot of attention to security. If you're really doing something risky, then I would recommend you use a stripped-down browser, which has a lot of extensions turned off. So a good one there is there's Tor, which you should all know about. Comes with a Tor browser, which makes browsing through Tor easily. But one of the nice things about that browser is you can use it without Tor, and it's stripped down. It's about as secure as a browser can be. We hope. We know the NSA targets it specifically. but most of the time the NSA is not your problem. Yeah, so this should ring alarm bells, but I think everybody's comfortable with that. This should ring alarm bells as well. And it might not be an email, right? It could be a tweet, Facebook IM, any communication channel where you receive a generic message asking you to click on a link should make you immediately suspicious. And that's what Greg just said. You should all know where to read that URL. And this is, if I could change just one thing, this would be it, is to teach people how not to fall prey to phishing attacks. Phishing attacks are wonderful. They're very easy to do. They're very low risk for the attacker. They're very cheap. They require no technical sophistication. And this is the great thing, you don't have to attack your target. You can attack anyone in the organization, or even anyone that the target trusts, right? Because if they can compromise a friend of yours who you trust, and then you receive an email from your friend saying, please click on this link, then they can get you. Phishing is getting more sophisticated. There's something called spear phishing, which is if they learn a little bit about you, then they can start to add context to the email. So again, we have to start to be a little more suspicious, especially anytime any website ever asks you for a password. You got to read the URL at the top to make sure it's going to the site you think it is. Yes?
Sorry, but you already mentioned the working of those kind of messages over the URL and shortened,
Yeah, so that came up in the last session as well. So this is actually a tricky problem. If it's a bit.ly URL, then you're not going to see the URL until after it's loaded in your browser. And although it's less common, there are cases where someone can drop malware on your computer just by visiting the URL, even if you don't type in a password. I don't know if it's practical to suggest that you unshorten the link, because there's websites that will unshorten links without going to them, right? So you can check, but that means you would have to check on every link. I would say certainly check anytime you receive an email that looks like that.
You can also, for bit.ly, you just add a plus sign at the end of the URL, and it shows you on the bit.ly page what the URL is.
So you can use bit.ly itself to tell you what the URL is, yeah.
Would you tweet that, please?
Sure.
Yeah, there's a few other URL expanders out there. The trick is...
People, tweet.
Okay, read the URL before you click, and don't type in passwords ever without reading the address at the top, so you make sure you go where you think you're going. Yeah.
To clarify, as an extension of the ideally you don't want a site, but ideally you have a browser extension maybe that will help you with that. So Hover, right?
Is there a browser extension that will do that?
I would like to think there would be, but I don't know.
There should be, yes, I agree, there should be a browser extension that will expand links for you. That would be very helpful for really everybody. So that's the bad news. The good news is that if you know what you're doing, you can defend against it. So the Syrian Electronic Army, which we don't know if they're part of the Assad regime, but they're certainly working on their side, managed to hack the AP Twitter account, the New York Times and the Washington Post. We think all of those were basically phishing attacks. They did not get the Guardian. And look at this, it's a sustained campaign of multiple different emails. So it's getting sophisticated, but if you know what you're doing, you can resist that. Here's my basic phishing defense advice. What I'm trying to get you to do is have little alarm bells go off in your head at the right times. I want you to know that this is the most likely attack vector and to be alert for it, and to have everybody in your organization be alert for it. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to recommend that everybody should be doing is securing their storage. So if you're working on a particular story, obviously you have information that relates to that story. But even if you're not working on a sensitive story, you have information that is very useful to people, to would-be attackers. So you've got stored passwords, right? So think about if you handed your laptop to an attacker with, let's say it was already logged in, so they didn't have to type in your password, what could they do? They could get your address book, they could send fake emails, they might be able to look at internal company directories, they might be able to log into internal web servers, they might get VPN connections. There's a lot of stuff on your laptop that an attacker would love to have. So this is another one of those cases where everybody has got to protect this. So first and most obvious thing, you should have a boot up password on your computer. When it goes to screensaver, it should ask you to have a password to come back. And we're also going to talk about disk encryption. So again, not a theoretical threat. This is a real story. It's a thing that really happened. I'm sure it's happened many times, but here's one that we know about. In this case, this was a journalist who had secure data, who was working on a story. And they grabbed him just off, from his hotel. More likely, you might be stopped at the border in this case. So you got to think about if you're working in a hostile place, how could people get my laptop? The authorities could arrest you, or they could just break into your hotel room while you're out. And this is terrible, right? Like, this put the lives of many people in danger. So my advice to you is don't be that guy. Get this stuff right, because people's lives will depend on it in certain cases. These are the basic questions that you can ask about security and storage. The first thing you got to do is keep track of where the data is. And there's probably a lot more copies than you think. If you take pictures, you transfer those pictures from a card to your laptop, and now there's 2 copies, one on the card, one on your laptop. If you have backups, there's going to be a copy there. If you have cloud syncing turned on, there's a copy that a third party owns, which is very bad news in most cases. You probably want to turn off cloud backups. In fact, security issues are the biggest problem with using cloud services of any type, and I have to recommend extreme caution, unfortunately, with all of the convenient cloud things. Yes?
Can you distinguish there between security issues, well, there's legal security issues, as in you're not provided to be subpoenaed.
Yes.
And then there's practical security issues, as in you're not provided, you're not secure, or you may not trust your cloud provider. Those are 3 separate scenarios.
Right, so there's really important distinctions here, and we're going to get into that a little more. I've been largely talking about technical measures so far. A complete security plan has a lot of parts to it. There is technical, legal, operational, and physical security, and the attacker doesn't care. They'll break any of those. But yeah, certainly the legal implications of who can legally get your data when are really important, and we'll cover that a little more. So this is basically what you have to think about, right? So where are the copies? How does someone get them? Under could they get a copy, I should actually add, can they subpoena it from a third party? Or steal it from a third party? Or is the third party itself a threat or a collaborator with your adversary? And then the basic advice is use disk encryption, right? So you sort of have to assume that at any point your laptop is going to fall into enemy hands, and you want it to be not possible for them to get anything. So that there's sort of levels upon levels of that, but the basic advice is everybody should be using disk encryption. This is another one of those, you're in a high-risk profession, let's do the basic due diligence type of things. Modern whole disk encryption systems are they're very easy to use. They don't slow your computer down. They're free. Use them. So that's the end of my sort of general advice. Now I'm going to talk about what to do for a particular story. So that was, everyone in the newsroom should be doing this, is you're about to embark on some story where there is risk. And there's different types of risk, right? So one of the misconceptions, I think, around journalism security is people always ask me, what tools should I be using? And the answer is, it depends. If your adversary is the NSA or U.S. authorities, then Gmail is a terrible idea because they can just subpoena it. You don't have to be the NSA to get someone's Gmail account. You can be the local police. You can be whatever sheriff's department, and they can serve a subpoena. On the other hand, if your adversary is the Chinese government, say you're doing reporting with activists in China, Gmail is probably not a bad choice for them because the connection is secure, it's all via HTTPS, and Google is not going to cooperate with the Chinese government. They've already moved all of their servers out of mainland China into Hong Kong. So to think through these types of issues, you need threat modeling. These are the basic questions that you need to ask yourself when working out a security plan. So first you want to know what you want to protect. You got to know who you're going to protect it from. You got to know what the capabilities are. And again, that's legal, technical, operational, physical. And then you have to know what happens if your security fails. And the reason you have to know why, you have to understand the risk because you have to know if you can do the story at all. And it sort of answers the how paranoid should I be question. So yeah, I see people shooting this slide. This is good. This is another one of those. Maybe if there's one thing I could say today, it would be phishing. If there's two things, this would be the second thing. Yeah, I'll be tweeting them immediately after this talk. So here's the first question: what do I want to keep private? I break this into two things. One is sort of the data question. So, obviously you might have notes or emails or documents or photos or whatever. The other is this more subtle question of what category of thing am I protecting? So if you use PGP to encrypt your email, no one can read the contents of those email, assuming you managed to do it right. But they still know who you sent the email to. So there's no sort of one-size-fits-all protection. You have to ask about specific types of information. So is it important one of the best distinctions is privacy versus anonymity. Are you concerned about someone reading the email, or are you concerned about someone knowing who you sent the email to? Anonymity is a lot harder, if that's what you need. And the next question is, who are you fighting against? Now, I know the NSA is much in the news, and we're very concerned about it, and I think rightly so. But most of the time, the NSA is not your problem, because most of the time, the NSA doesn't care. So who does care? And that could be a government, especially if you're working in a conflict zone, or internationally in some capacity, or writing about that government, or working with a source in that country. It could be some other authority, it could be police department. Or it could be, an oil company you're reporting on, right? It really depends on the story itself. And you have to ask that question because that question determines what they can do. So the next question you ask is, what are their capabilities? And there's actually even more than I've talked about. So most people, when they think of digital security, they think of all the technical methods, right? It's sort of all of the sexy stuff, like they're going to hack into my computers. And I mean, yes, you have to defend against that. But if you're writing a story about a crooked bank, they're much more likely to try to use legal means, probably. So you have to think about all of the legal methods they might use to read your communications or break your data. And then social. This is a very old technique in computer security. It's called social engineering, right? This is, you call up your IT department, or the attacker calls up your IT department and says, hi, I'm new here. Oh, that's why my name isn't in your employee database, but I'm new, and I need a password reset on this account. Can you do that for me? right? And that works a surprising amount of the time. Or you call up and say, and somebody in this session on Thursday actually had this happen. Yes, we're from Verizon, and did you know you can get free upgrades to your account? Please go to this URL and log in and select your free upgrade. And the URL was not a Verizon URL. Also, you should never give your password to anyone. A properly designed security system, no one other than you should ever know it, not even system administrators. So just anytime anyone asks you for any password, a red flag should go off. And anytime sometimes you have to end up giving a password to a friend, you're out of the office, whatever situation, you gotta change it as fast as you can. Or if you ever have to log in at an internet cafe or any computer that you don't control, which might be insecure, change it immediately afterwards. Or if you get warning messages, there's lots of reasons to change your password. Operational. Security is about meticulous habits. So the easiest example of this is if you're trying to keep a source identity anonymous, that one time you don't connect over Tor is going to be that time that the adversary is able to figure out who you're talking to. Or that one time you left your laptop in an insecure place, right? It's always going to be about that one time, or that one person, or that one mistake. And so you have to be completely anal about your operational procedure, which means, of course, that you have to have an operational procedure. You have to plan it out. How are we going to communicate? How is this going to work? What are we going to do if we have something urgent to say but we don't have the regular channel? And you just got to make that call and say, well, we can't do that. We're just going to have to sacrifice some flexibility and capability for security. And then physical. I am not really qualified to talk about, actually most of these, legal, operational, and physical security, right? So you need to be talking to your lawyer for the legal aspect of this. And you need to be talking to whoever does, most organizations, well, all organizations that operate in conflict zones have someone whose job it is to protect the journalists, so they will know, how to help you not have your laptop fall into enemy hands. Yeah?
Kind of detailed question on your desk. In conflict zones, are we best off just writing our notes physically, writing our stories so the internet turned off?
So I will answer you and say, what is your threat model, right? Is your threat model a sophisticated electronic eavesdropper, or is your threat model people breaking down your door? That's the only way to answer that question.
Okay.
Or being detained at the border, or it depends.
I don't have a specific thing in mind right now.
Then there is no answer to the question.
Okay.
So all of these different things, they have to be part of the plan, and they all have to work together. And then, of course, that means that there's different ways to defend yourself. So this is the only slide where I'm going to talk about tools, because lots of people want to tell you about tools. But here's sort of your basic arsenal. Communication security. Of all of these things, I would say OTR, which stands for off-the-record messaging. It's a type of IM protocol which most chat clients now support. That is your best and sort of most well-vetted way to communicate security. It's a lot easier to set up than PGP. CryptoCat is a web-based interface to OTR. It's about to be audited by an open source security group called the Open Internet Tools Project. The beautiful thing about CryptoCat is you don't need to install anything. You can just set up a chat room and get a link to your source, and it's very easy for them. So I suspect that CryptoCat is going to become an increasingly viable option for sort of daily security use. And of course, the thing about security is, or encryption, is the more people who use it, the better that one secure source is protected. Because if only the secure source is the one using communication, then an attacker monitoring the communication, or snooping that open Wi-Fi in the coffee shop or at the conference or whatever, immediately knows where to look and knows when you're communicating with that source. And also the other problem is that sources don't always know they're going to be sources, right? So how many of you have done this? hi, you know, I heard from someone that, you know, your company is doing X, Y, Z. Is that true? Oh, no, 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 that's not right. We're actually doing, you know, QRS. So they just told you something they would never tell you, but you got it out of them because you were verifying another piece of information. So imagine that conversation where you go, I'm going to ask you to reveal confidential information, and I want to protect your identity. Can you install OTR so before we have this, and then we can have a secure communication online? So that's a problem, which is why one of the best things we could possibly do for journalism is to normalize the use of secure tools, which means they have to be extremely lightweight, which means that although in theory there is better security than CryptoCat, in practice, because it's so easy to get people to use, it might be the best choice. And then password management and disk encryption, which we already discussed. Legal protection. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I will give you one piece of solid advice, which I checked with Nabia Syed, who was just on the panel this morning, yesterday. Under US law, there's a law called the Privacy Protection Act, which came out of a court case where the cops seized all of the records of a Stanford student newspaper to try to see who was in a sit-in in 1979. Out of that, in the early 80s, we got a law which says that you can't get journalists' records without a warrant. Now, here's the catch. If those records are stored on with a third party, such as a cloud service provider, the law is different. The law doesn't protect records stored with a third party. So this law, this state of legal affairs has an operational implication, which is if you possibly can, keep your data, and I mean physically keep your data, like the actual location, physical location of physical media on which the data is stored, keep that in-house. So you want your sensitive material on a drive in your office. Yes?
So what are the prospects of getting the law changed to recognize that cloud storage is in fact an extension of what you think you own?
I don't know what the prospects are, but I can say that that is a key fight. And a lot of people are fighting that, and you should help. You first. And
What about the use of journalists globally and our biggest
so I think there's two different cases. The first is you work for a news organization, but you're not in that office. And then I would say use a VPN to keep your storage on a server in the main office. That should work. And the other is you're a freelancer and you're not associated with anyone, and I would say, well, that's harder, but there's still going to be advantage of having the data on your person versus on a cloud, maybe, depending on whether personal seizure is a threat, right? So again, it depends on your threat model. Yes?
Going further, define premise, because there's a third-party provider giving you a service, and then there's, you know, Telex that has data centers and a company with
Right, okay.
stuff there. Is that your premise? Is that not your premise? Do you not know?
I don't know. I don't know the details of how that's defined under law. But your lawyer will, so ask them. So you need a technical strategy, you need a legal strategy. The last question for threat modeling is, what are you risking? So naively, we just want the best security all the time. The problem with that is that security has a cost. It costs time, money, and convenience. And all of those things mean that security costs capability. There are stories that you will not be able to get if you apply proper security. Can you still do those stories? It depends on what the risk is. So for example, I gave the very simple example of if you need that source to use a secure channel to install PGP or something and set it up before you can talk to them, that may mean that you can't actually talk to them security because you know, they're going to give you a half hour of their time, and it's going to take that whole half hour to set up the secure tunnel. So unfortunately, there are trade-offs here. That's a sort of black and white one, but there are all these little subtle trade-offs, right? Like, oh, I'm using instant messenger, but not, I have secure instant messaging, but not secure email, and they're not online right now, and I want to tell them something tonight instead of tomorrow when they're going to be on. Maybe I can like send them a cryptic email. Well, You know, I'm not going to say categorically don't do that, because there are certain situations in which that's going to be important to do. But to make those choices, you have to understand what you're risking. Now we're going to go to the nearly last part of this, which is scenarios. These are scenarios from an assignment I give. I teach a course called Computational Journalism at Columbia. We have one day on security and surveillance and privacy. And the assignment is I go through all this threat modeling stuff, and then I make them pick a scenario. So let's talk these through. This is the one that was actually blown, or more or less the one that actually got blown last year. So what does a security plan look like for this? How do you do this? Anybody got any ideas? Yeah.
So, get the metadata out of the images first.
Very good.
Possibly split them up before encrypting them so that you have partial images. So instead of one single JPEG file, you've got something that has to reassemble the other end. Ideally, you do that in code.
Okay, but if all the parts are stored on your laptop, that doesn't help. Okay.
Encrypt, and obviously, encrypt before sending.
How do you send it?
I send them using an email service that other people in the country also use, so that I blend in. I don't send them to my organization's email address.
So, okay, so that's sort of trying to stay anonymous.
I create some kind of
Yeah, so there's various possible solutions to this. It depends, again, on what you think the Syrian government is able and willing to do. One of the most elegant solutions I've heard of this problem is have a VPN in some other country, could be could be here, that is not associated with your news organization. So that solves both the security of transmission, and it solves the identifying you as a journalist problem. Well, it doesn't solve it, but it helps. The other thing,
if other people in that country use that service.
yeah. Although a random service, I mean, it depends whether you think that the government is monitoring traffic to say someone's using a VPN we've never seen before or not. And then there's also the issue: what do you do when you cross the border? Right? You can't have those photos on you, at least not in an encrypted form. So you can do things like encrypt them before you cross the border. And by the way, you have to ask yourself, is it a real threat that they could force you to reveal the password? If that's the case, the answer is don't know the password. Encrypt them with some random string of characters as a password. There's lots of random password generators. Send the password via a secure channel to Home Office, and then lose the password. That way it doesn't matter what they do, you can't give up the password. That's one simple trick. Yeah.
What about putting them on a secure FTP server that you control that's outside of the country, and again, toss away the password?
Yeah, so that's a similar, that's like this dead drop idea, with the caveat that FTP is actually somewhat hard to secure because it's quite old, but yeah, something like that.
But it also has to be easy enough that people will do it.
Yes, which is why a VPN is not a bad choice, right? There's lots of software to set that up. The other thing is get rid of the files before you cross the border, which means in practice secure erase software. Right, so the easiest way to not have something intercepted when you cross a border is to not be carrying it. That should be your number one tactic if you actually have this problem. Let's look at another one. So this is verbatim the text that I used to teach this the last 2 years, which I wrote pre-Snowden. It worked, it was remarkably prescient. So we all know how, I mean, I don't know if we all know, but if you've been following the story, you know how this problem was actually solved in the event. This is a difficult one. When your adversary is the intelligence service of a major government, you've got problems. So what do you do? How is this solved in the event? Does anyone know?
Meeting person.
So they met in person, but how did they establish the connection before they met in person? What was that? Encrypted email, yeah.
And email services which shut down.
So not just encrypted, but anonymous, right? So we made this distinction between securing the contents and securing the identity. This is a case where you have to secure the identity. So, you know, a dead drop email address accessed over Tor. And then for the really sensitive stuff, they met in person. And then the other thing they did, which was actually, I thought, a very interesting move, and there's reasons other than security for this, is he just came out a few days after, he revealed his own identity, which solves like a whole swath of security problems. I don't actually have any good advice for protecting someone's identity against a major intelligence service. Like, that's spycraft. I don't think any of us are qualified to do that. Yeah, in the back. Yep. Yeah, so air gapping, right? So if your adversary is likely to be able to mount serious attacks over the network, then anything you want to protect, you can't have on a computer connected to the network. So if you're serious about this, you're actually going to physically pull out the Wi-Fi hardware from the machine, open it up with a screwdriver, pull out the Wi-Fi card. And then also the software on the machine has to be secure, which means you have to assemble a clean operating system image from secure sources. This is a lot of work. I know people who have done this. But this is why you have to do your threat modeling, because your threat modeling will tell you if you need to do it.
One other thing that sort of goes to the extreme for that was when, I guess when MI6 came to the Guardian, they actually destroyed the list of computers and the information was stored on the smash installation.
Yep. Yes.
Well, so smashing computers with sledgehammer sometimes works, but it has to be done in a sort of a targeted way. You can't just break them up because.
Yeah, no, they took an angle grinder to the hard drives.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, unless you want that data.
But the other thing that I would do in this situation is when meeting the source, I would make sure to sign keys with them to prevent man-in-the-middle attacks later.
Yes. So, unfortunately, authentication and man-in-the-middle attacks are probably a little beyond what we can get to today. But if you need to set up a secure communication channel, you're going to have to go a lot deeper than what I've showed you today. Because there are ways like, you know, I said, well, you know, CryptoCat and OTR are good channels, and they are, but you have to use them right, because a serious attacker can do something called a man-in-the-middle attack, where they don't break the encryption, but what they do is they make you think you're talking to the source when in fact you're actually going through their machine first. They're passing messages for you. Yeah, unfortunately, this is one of those things where I can't possibly tell you all the things that you would need to know in one slide. Honestly, if your adversary is the NSA, you might just have to give up, right? Like, I can give you all this advice about secure communication, but none of it's guaranteed, right? The only thing that's really going to work is, you know, an air-gapped machine in a safe house. And again, how many of us are really qualified to do that? Yeah.
I mean, if my adversary was the NSA, I'd get a lawyer, but I'd also get a computer security professional.
And that is, in fact, how those stories are being done, right? So it's the legal and technical and operational, right? And it's not just the lawyer and the computer security professional, it's also how do we keep the location where the reporting happens secret? Anyway. So here's another one. Here's a corporate example. So how do you do this one? What's that? Get printouts? Actually, that's not bad. You know, one way to protect against electronic security problems is to not use electronic materials. Certainly an option. Meet them in the parking garage, get the printouts, right? Or you know, have them hand over the USB key. This story also, you have the anonymity issue, right? But again, threat model. So is the bank going to be able to monitor your emails?
No.
They could subpoena them potentially. Is the bank going to be able to monitor their emails? Right, so that has implications about like don't use the corporate email account, et cetera, et cetera. Again, really all I'm trying to get you to do is sort of think this through. Because again, there is no one size fits all. So here's another one. Here's you know, you're working with a Chinese dissident and you're not in China. So you start with a phone number. That may be the most difficult part, because that phone is not going to be secure. But you did meet them once. So what do you do that time when you meet them?
What he said.
What he said? What did he say?
You give them a code or find their neighbors or friends' phone numbers and get them to talk.
Possibly. I mean, you know, getting their friends involved risks their friends, and also that's tricky. But if you can meet in person, so there's a basic principle of secure communication, which is that if you have one secure communication channel, you can leverage it into a second one. And so if you have a face-to-face meeting, which you can feel safe about, what you have to do is you have to exchange, you have to set up secure contact addresses and exchange those, and also exchange keys. So the you know, PGP keys, fingerprint verification for OTR, all of this sort of stuff that when you get into this you'll see how to do. But the basic notion is set up the secure communication by meeting them in person. And then because anonymity is important here, I would also recommend that you use that channel over Tor. You will have a plan. When I give this assignment to my students, normally where it falls down is they have some elaborate plan that won't possibly work because you can't possibly get everybody to do everything right all the time. So not only does the plan have to be secure, but it has to be implementable. It has to be something that people will actually be able to do. And people have to understand what's going to break it, because you'll run into scenarios that aren't in the plan. So it's not really enough to tell the source, you know, always use this channel to contact me. They have to understand a little bit about what is going to compromise that channel. And we're nearly out of time, but I might run through very quickly. So you all know the WikiLeaks cables, yeah? Are you all aware that, as far as we can tell, they were never meant, the whole archive was never meant to be public? Because they were being released slowly, they were being redacted. But then the whole thing came out in 2011. So that was a fuck-up between David Ley at The Guardian, who was one of the reporters on that project, and WikiLeaks. And they both fucked up. And the reason that that leak happened is they had different conceptions of what made that file secure. So we can get into that in a minute, but the thing that I'm trying to get across here is that this isn't just about planning the perfect security. This is about planning something that people can actually do. And because one of the attacks is an operational attack, where you wait for them to make a mistake, they can't ever make a mistake, which means the plan has to be extremely simple and convenient, if at all possible. So this is really where this falls down in practice. So questions before I run through the WikiLeaks case study? All right. So here's the case study. The idea was this. Assange and Ley met in a cafe. Assange gave Ley a password on a slip of paper. It actually wasn't even the complete password. It was a password missing one word. So he thought of this threat where someone could stop the reporter and get that piece of paper. and said, go to this URL and download this file. It's a secret URL. It's only going to be up for an hour. I'm going to take the URL down after you're done. So all of this work, he got it. But then, later it all came out. Does anyone know how that actually happened? All right. So this was the plan. So M is the message, E is the encrypted message. That little drum that says URL, that's the web server for that URL. And what I've shown you is every place that the encrypted message passes through or is stored. And you use the password to encrypt it at the start, and you use the password to decrypt it at the end. So that was the plan. This is what Assange was thinking, right? We have this scheme where we send it through with a secure URL. And he was thinking that the attacker, who's the sad red face, doesn't have the password. So even if they downloaded it from that URL, or intercepted it in transit, or let's say got it from an inadvertently, say the encrypted file was inadvertently included in a WikiLeaks archive, which is what actually happened. Anyway, if they got that file in some way, they could do nothing because they didn't have the password. But Lay had a different model. He understood that the security came about from a different property. He thought, well, you know, because that file is only going to be up at that URL for an hour, when I publish my book, and this was a year later, I can put the password in the book because the file is gone. So now the attacker has the password. So here you see the password crossed out. There it's not crossed out, but the file is gone. It was transmitted a year ago, that's gone. It was at a secret URL, that's gone. No problem. So you know where this is going. This is what actually happened. Fuck-ups at both ends. First, Lay published the password. Do not ever reveal a password even years after the fact, because the whole point of encrypting something with a password is that the encrypted communication is vulnerable. Right? If you think the channel is secure, you don't need a password, you don't need encryption. So someone could have intercepted it and stored it. Someone could get a copy later. Don't ever reveal a password. It's never safe, not even a decade later. So that's fuck up the first. Fuck up the second is that encrypted file made it into an archive of WikiLeaks material that was widely distributed, apparently by volunteers, right? So I don't know, I don't know if you blame Assange or you blame a WikiLeaks volunteer. But here's the thing. You should never use the same password for more than one communication. So it can make sense to include that encrypted file in the archive as sort of insurance, backup storage, widely distributed, but it should have been encrypted with a different password. Because otherwise, if someone can break one communication with one password, they can break all of it. So this is what I was saying earlier, right? Use different passwords. He failed to use different passwords.
Assange?
Yeah. Because he was thinking it wasn't a problem, right? Assange was thinking that. Lay was thinking that. Put them together, the attacker has both the password and the message. So why am I showing you this very complicated case study? What's the point I'm trying to make?
Clear assumptions.
Right, so the security model has to be understood by everybody. Everybody has to know what makes it secure and what's going to break it. Which means, unfortunately, that the people you're working with, including your sources, have to understand all of this stuff, which is why operational and conceptual simplicity is so important. And so, I mean, look at this stuff, right? It was, pieces of paper on napkins, and, high-grade encryption, and dead drops on the web, and, a master hacker. And it's still fun. Anyways, that's all I've got. Here are some further resources for you, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions. Thanks. Yes?
I don't know if you addressed this earlier, but do you have a recommendation for password management?
Oh, that's right. Someone asked that yesterday, or Thursday. No.
Repeat the question for the
Password managers for Teams. So if a bunch of people have to manage an account.
Meldium.
Meldium?
MELDIUM.
MELDIUM.
It's cloud-based, so it only works for some use cases, but it does work for Teams. Also, I think LastPass has some pretty good team features these days.
Do you get it?
MELDIUM is a terrible name. I don't know why they chose it. But also LastPass is pretty good for Teams if you can't use the cloud, which you probably can.
Cool. Anything else?
If you wanted to introduce this topic in not a spoon-fed manner, but in a staged manner, for example, to your newsroom or your organization, what sort of resources are available to you online or through books or whatever to get yourself up to convince people to do this?
So is the problem convincing them or is the problem teaching them how?
Both.
Well,
The first problem is convincing, and then the second problem is to do the teaching, but the convincing's got to come first, or you won't ever have a chance to teach.
right. So maybe this will work, is to just show them all these horrible things that have happened when journalists get this wrong. And then case study.
And then maybe the Assange case study.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should
But
be-
that's a fairly complicated case. I think that's an argument for clarity and simplicity and understanding. And the other thing, I guess it's, so going back to my sort of 3 messages for today, right? The other thing is to understand that it's everyone's responsibility. It's not just the people who are working on a high-risk story because of phishing attacks. And like I said on Thursday, you know, if I could only teach journalists one thing, it would be how to recognize and respond to phishing attacks, because my suspicion is that's the most common vector. It's certainly the most common vector that I know about. But this is also, I mean, so I have to preface or sort of bracket everything I told you today with saying we know almost nothing collectively about how journalists are being attacked because we don't have a mechanism to systematically collect it. So I'm working on that, and I hope you all will help me set up that systematic mechanism. We need a journalism security community, and we don't really have one. So if you want to be part of that, please let me know. At the very least, I'm starting a mailing list. I'm hoping to get the people responsible for security in all of the major news organizations on this list, and start figuring this stuff out. Anything else? I think we got to leave in just a minute. Okay, thank you.